Hi, and welcome to another episode of No Limit with Krzysztof and Luke. Today is Monday. No, it's Tuesday, isn't it? We pushed it a day. Tuesday, the 6th of December, and this will go out in about a week's time. I think this is episode 6. Maybe we are becoming old hands, buddy.
Indeed. How are you?
I'm good. I've got a little bit of a cold, but apart from that, all good. I'm really getting into tennis at the moment. I joined a new gym, and I'm trying to play tennis every day. And just to literally to hit balls, I'll be going to cardio tennis as well as getting coaching and some match play stuff. Like my game is appalling, but I can return a ball. Today, very exciting. One of the ladies invited me to join her doubles game tomorrow. So I guess my game is not quite as bad as I thought it was.
Ooh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. It's so odd to me. We are doppelgangers in these strange ways, because I went through a very passionate tennis phase myself.
Right.
And not least of because the author that I studied professionally was a huge tennis fan, David Foster Wallace, and wrote maybe some of the best essays ever written on tennis. I don't know if you've read any.
I told you I don't do any reading, right? I just do.
Oh, that's right. You're illiterate, right? Okay, well, so there's this magic thing that happens when these little squiggly shapes on a piece of paper, when you line them up, right? They convey magic meaning. It's wild. But check out if you ever have the time, check out the essay Roger Federer as Religious Experience.
Okay, that sounds interesting. The title's got me interested.
It's fascinating. It's a beautiful, beautiful essay about the genius of the body, in a way.
By the way,
and he points
your Fed hiking Twitter post a couple of weeks ago with a handsome looking Federer on a Swiss mountain. That definitely didn't get enough love. You need to go retweet that.
You need to repost that. Right, about Fed hikes. Yeah, we need more Fed hikes. Well, unfortunately, I'm doing much worse than you.
What's happening?
I try to run every day, pretty much. And this year I've had such a good go of it. Every single day. I retired from my competitive running days, but now I'm trying to get more serious about it again, but in a different way, maybe through consistency. So I started running, I got up to, I ran 10 miles the morning of my wedding, and things were going so great. So I figured I'd add a leg strengthening routine. So started going to the gym and doing all of this, right, to avoid injury, which is the worst thing for me. Of all the things that happen, like an injury. And lo and behold, I injured what felt like my hamstring. And it feels like a hamstring pull, right? Which is the worst. I've injured hamstrings before in so many ways. I self-diagnosed it as a sciatic nerve, but it turns out I went to a chiropractor. It's not that. And it's some sort of bursitis thing, right? We get bursitis in our shoulders, an inflamed pocket of whatever. But there's no cure. It turns out it's one of these things gets inflamed. There's no cure, and there's not much blood going to it. So you kind of need to do nothing. And I went on a small trot even. And, anything I do pretty much inflames it. So my quest for running every day of the year, so close, so close. And now I can't. So you know what I'm doing instead? Okay. Is without exercise and without running, I just fall apart. I feel miserable. So I started reading the Wim Hof method, the Iceman. You come across him, and I've forced myself to take his advice that the first most important path to health via cold therapy or cold showers in the morning. And I've never done cold showers before because I'm too soft, and I'm a creature of comfort and leisure and the finer things in life. And Luke, man, oh man, let me tell you, those first 15 seconds, whoo! But I'm on day 12. Okay. I've stayed with it. I started at 30 seconds, a minute, now a minute and a half. And I feel so good afterwards. It's exactly as he says. It's this magical feeling afterwards. We're tingly, and I feel and so it's making up for the depression I feel from the injury. What do you think of all this? Am I going mad?
I kind of experiment with myself from time to time. Did a couple of years of intermittent fasting, and actually it's quite fun just to kind of go a day, 2 days without eating. Quite interesting how the sort of mental acuity you have. I guess your caveman brain is suddenly switching on. You're like, I need to get food. I played around with like how long could I hold my breath, and did some like 30-day hold your breath for 5 minutes program. That's pretty exciting. That's good fun. But the Wim Hof stuff, the ice baths, that's always been on my list. But I'm too much of a pussy to do it. It's so horrific.
The ice bath stuff, yeah, no, that's terrifying. The cold shower thing, though, I'm going to make this official. I challenge you in the next 2 weeks to take 5 consecutive cold showers. And all you need to do is 30 seconds.
30 seconds is a long time.
But in the end, it's only the first 15 that are the real problem.
All right. Okay. How many days? 5 days.
We'll
Challenge accepted. All right. Give me 2 weeks. I'm coming out to your beautiful country fairly soon, so I'll be in the snow for 3 months this winter. So there's plenty of opportunities to be like icy cold when I'm jumping out of the hot tub.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe I should build up to that, build up my cold tolerance. Okay.
Right on. Yeah. So cold showers, everyone. I can't believe I'm advocating for this, but it's stunning. It's stunning what it does. Okay.
We should talk about investing. This is an investing podcast. We've been rambling for 10 minutes already. But I'm very sorry to hear about your injury. I hope it gets better.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, where should we start? We had a little debate last week that I quite enjoyed. If you didn't catch episode 5, we were debating whether there should be additional protections in place for investors. Essentially, should you need to pass an exam to be an investor? And the small number of people that replied seemed to agree with me that we need to be egalitarian and remove the barriers.
And I voted the other way.
I think I brought you around.
Yeah. Okay. In my own defense, I'm going to say, just take a look around. Look at all the scams and frauds and things falling apart. So go ahead. Don't take any tests. I have the evidence I need. Humans can't control themselves.
Our emotions are, our biggest challenge, I suppose, if you're trying to be a successful investor. Fear or greed.
In fact, right, I wonder if even what I'm maybe advocating for is less like, okay, you have to know X, Y, and Z, right? Which would be nice, I think. But maybe it's more along the line of, okay, I took this test and I have this license, so I therefore need to uphold a way of being that justifies me having a license, right? That it would be a kind of loop-like system of checks and balances. Right? Like a pilot, having gone through the series of trainings, has a license, therefore isn't going to attempt any funny business.
Although a pilot, you've got hundreds of other people's lives in your hands. It's a little bit different to managing your own investment portfolio, although you can blow up your life quite badly if you get it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, we should. I don't mean to divert us into the topic about FTX, but I wonder if he had a license.
Well, unregulated industry, crypto, right? So I would guess not. Yeah.
It feels so odd, just to be totally upfront with you. It feels so odd for me advocating for a position that's sort of on the bureaucratic side. My own personal errors are always on the side of rebellion and kind of pushing the limits of, and advocating for anarchy and, the chaotic forces, the Dionysian sort of thing. So it's odd. But I just want to say, who am I?
You're a married man now. It's this new responsibility. Yeah.
Is this what happens?
You suddenly get all nurturing. You want to protect people. So one thing I was thinking, actually, I did quite enjoy our debate. So we should try and do that a bit more often. I think I'd like us to be more controversial on this podcast. I'm definitely up for that, albeit there are probably some lines we should never cross. So yeah, let's try and find some points of difference, and we'll debate them on future podcasts. And if you're listening and you've got a suggestion, then go tweet us. Let us know what we should go to battle over.
We're looking for genuine debate. We're not looking to just be nice and play along, because that's pretty bland and boring, I think. I guess so. Maybe it's useful. All I'll say is that what's so fascinating to me about the FTS saga as it unfolds is the kind of, from my understanding, psychological, the level of his thinking on which he has to exist, where he's fooling everyone around him, including incredibly smart people with huge amounts of invested capital, And somehow, somewhere in this, no one double checks anything.
You're talking there, just for anyone who doesn't know anything about what's going on. Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder, CEO of FTX, one of the, what were previously one of the biggest crypto platforms in the world, and how his house of cards has come tumbling down. And I guess the question is, it seems to be, did he kind of blunder into this with poor governance, or did he sort of design this initially as this crazy house of cards? Was this kind of malicious intent to defraud the world, or did he just kind of screw up?
Did you hear the apology tour? I mean, the long conversations.
Read about it.
The DealBook Summit.
Didn't listen to it directly.
Okay. So what was stunning to me as a listener is that during those interviews, he feels believable. Like he feels kind of like almost like a confused teenager, almost like soft-spoken and shaky. And yet, when I listened to some analysis, the level of sophistication that he was working at and creating a crypto exchange platform, you cannot do that without a profound level of understanding and math and sophistication. Maybe this takes us a little bit to poker, right? Poker in its most extreme forms, or maybe highest levels, right? You have so much pressure, there's so much fear involved, right? And yet you're being forced to sometimes lie, right? It for the sake of the hand. And in order to do that skillfully, you kind of have to dissociate from your body or fear or all of the other stuff that's going on. I mean, that's an art, right? In that context, it's a kind of performative art, but to do it in this global way, I guess all I'm saying is it was shocking to me to see that I started believing his apology tour, and then only then I was reminded, wait a second, that doesn't add up. None of it adds up.
Yeah. If you're bluffing in poker, if you can convince yourself, that you have the hand you're representing, you're going to put on a much stronger show. And what's that term? Cognitive dissonance. Maybe this SBF guy, maybe he in his mind he genuinely is, the hero, and it just kind of, it got away from him and he was unlucky, and it could have played out very differently, and he could have, pivoted all these, deca-billion dollars into effective altruism and save the world. Maybe in his mind, that's kind of how he sees himself, as opposed to being the kind of arch villain in this massive global fraud on cryptocurrency enthusiasts.
It's so tragic how many people continue to have lost so much because of the bad actors in this space, which is a fascinating thing. I'm really thinking about Coinbase now, for example, a company that is highly regulated, and they're, the silver lining is they're saying everything in our business model is in the open. We're not in the Bahamas, and here's all the paperwork, right? Is that enough now at this point?
Right. And if even if they are running Coinbase following the regulations that don't quite exist yet, but at least they're doing what they say they're doing. If the whole of the cryptocurrency world implodes on the back of this FTX thing, and it's nowhere near over, there are many other big firms yet to go down. Like if the whole space collapses, Coinbase probably collapse along with them, even if they are well run. They're just in a broken industry.
Yeah, and it would remain to be seen whether anything rises from the ashes. Okay, I have. Would you like me to tell you about my latest ventures in reading?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Let me preamble this by saying I tried to learn the deepest roots of the whole first principles idea, right? To really become knowledgeable, you can't skip all the foundational steps. So in my attempt to learn about the semiconductor industry, turns out you have to understand physics.
Sure.
On that first principles level. And I've been dabbling with physics for many years, but on the quantum side. And it is useful for transistors. It's what makes it possible. But the weird stuff, right, is not really what's needed. And so I came across this book, which I finished last week, called Einstein's Fridge: how the difference between hot and cold explains the universe. And my goodness, there's so many ways that this book helped me tie a bunch of loose ends together in terms of how do these things actually work, like the underlying principles. And I came across some really fascinating little gems of trivial-ish things, but I was like, oh my God, like in this perspective, that's so mind-blowing. And yes, I think this book helped me understand the other book I finished, which is Chip War, which I'd like to talk a little bit about too. But it all goes together, Luke. All of the pieces fit.
So you now understand the physics of semiconductors, and this makes you a better investor. How?
I would say maybe if there's a golden rule in investing for me, it goes back to you have to understand the company that you're investing in, because there's too much noise, right? Everywhere else, there's going to be all the game theory stuff and all the deliberate misinformation and all of that. But if you truly fundamentally understand the business you own, it'll be easier to avoid all the other behavioral stuff. And it seems to me that when I consider investing in a semiconductor company and somebody tells me like something like, believe me, these things are magic, or these things are important, and then I go to bed like, cool, like, but how? Like, what makes them magic? Like, what do you know, like they're a chip. Like, I personally can't feel confident, right? Like, of maybe what I would call what's the moat here? Or like, what is the magic juice? But to understand it, you really have to keep like pulling back the layers until you get to this crazy thing I'll share with you. But you know, like, oh yeah, that's insane. Like, I get why this is $100 million machine. I get now on a fundamental level what problem this is solving.
I kind of hear where you're coming from. I guess it's reassuring if you feel you understand the business at a relatively low level, like the actual thing it's selling. That's quite important. But can you do that for everything in your portfolio? Like, there are some things in my portfolio where I don't have the bandwidth. I have to shrug and go, like, clearly this works because there is a customer base paying actual money and, you know, paying increasing amounts of money year after year. So clearly there is something. It's not just complete fiction. And I think you just have to sort of trust that's the case sometimes. But if it's to satisfy your own intellectual curiosity, like, go for it.
Yeah, I agree. We can't know everything. In this particular case with semiconductors, I thought I wanted to do a deep dive because, one, I think it's the future, and it rolls obviously into AI stuff, and it's a big industry. It's not just, say, one company, right? And so now it turns out there's a level of like, almost like I now have not just an understanding, but appreciation of this whole industry and so many of its players. And now I think on an intuitive level, I kind of say, I really do understand why a company like NVIDIA is special. Like, from the atoms to the transistors to all of it.
For those of us who don't have the time to read Einstein's Fridge, you fancy trying to, you know, give me the TLDR?
So there's this guy named Einstein, right?
No, I did a little bit of reading. So I gather he did actually invent a fridge, an actual fridge. Yeah. But that's not what you're talking about.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Yeah. Instead, I'm not going to, it's too complicated because the whole book is an explanation of the laws of thermodynamics and why they're laws, but the way that these particular laws affect everything, including there's a clear relationship between the laws of thermodynamics and information theory. It turns out this question of what is information and basically how heat and cold work, that they kind of align at a similar formula. And information theory is where bits come from, and bits are the things that create the digital world. Right? And the digital world is manipulated by these little inventions called transistors. And transistors, figuring out how to make more of them, is the semiconductor industry. So it all really, like, this is the stuff. Here are the fun things. I don't want to bore any listeners that are still awake at this point. I don't want to lose them. But I came up with a couple of like fun little tidbits to share.
Please do. Entertain me.
Let me pop quiz. pop quiz for you. When you have a say hot cup of tea and you put in an ice cube, there you go. Does the ice cube make the tea colder, or does the tea make the ice cube warmer?
Do they not just act on each other and they converge on some central temperature based on mass and okay, no. Right. I guess okay, let me take another shot at that then if that's incorrect. I guess everything is radiating heat, so everything in the universe is getting colder, and I don't know where I'm going with this. Go on, what's the answer?
Well, no, you at least take a bet. at least, so you got a 50-50 shot here.
The ice is making the tea cooler. Was that one of the options?
That is one of the options.
Go with that one.
Yeah, that's the wrong
one. What's happening, Krzysztof?
Well, it's the tea is making the ice warmer.
And
that is because ice is in a more stable configuration. Right. So the number of ways that ice can exist is fewer. The molecules call it more rigid and going at a slower temperature, and they're all kind of grouped in a particular way.
Okay, so like the hot tea molecules are like smashing into the ice, the crystalline ice molecules, and then busting them up, and therefore like energizing them, so they're melting, becoming hotter.
Kind of, but it's more wild than that. It's because the probability of ice is less than heat, and eventually the two find equilibrium, so that it's where time comes from. But that's a whole nother. The emergence of time comes from this very thing, but that's for another conversation.
So I feel like Douglas Adams, had this theorem, right? That like the whole universe was in a cup of tea. I'm sure that was one of the Hitchhiker's books.
Yeah, I'm sure, right? Because time is actually not a property of physics. It's an emergent quality and emerges heat equalizing cold, because that's where the balance ends up probabilistically. A cup of tea that has melted the ice is the most likely, most highly probable state for the universe to be in. Okay, but sorry for torturing you about that. And that explanation probably seems so jangled and mangled, but I'm obviously not a professional physicist. I finally finished Chip War.
Well done.
And I really can't say enough good things about that. I think Simon and I will be talking about it and making a podcast about the book specifically in the near future. But when I got to the chapter about EUV, which is extreme ultraviolet light, my mind was blown. Like, it's just so astounding what we're doing. And I wonder, and this is maybe that nerd in me coming out, where I think if you begin to appreciate what is involved in making semiconductors as an investor, you're going to end up having, I don't know if it's just more appreciation, but maybe more faith in your investment given what's being accomplished. So I'm happy to nerd out a little longer and kind of share with you from this short chapter about extreme ultraviolet light what actually goes into these things. The whole problem, in a sense, is size. We're trying to fit more and more transistors into a small acreage. We're talking about centimeters and millimeters, right? So how do you continue reducing size when the actual physical wavelength of visible light is, I believe, something like 248 nanometers or whatever? That's tiny, 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 right? But at some point, we hit a limit. So there's this thing called extreme ultraviolet light, which is something like 13.5 nanometers. But what's the problem? The problem is you can't go out and buy an EUV light bulb. You actually have to make this thing. Okay, cool. Let's make a thing that emits these tiny, tiny wavelengths, right? What goes into that? That's the shocking part. The way an EUV light is made, it requires, get this, pulverizing a small ball of tin with a laser. Okay, so I'm gonna turn to the book and read a couple of these sentences just so you get how insane this is. The best approach is to shoot a tiny ball of tin measuring 30 millionths of a meter wide, moving through a vacuum at a speed of around 200 miles per hour. The tin is then struck twice with a laser, the first pulse to warm it up, the second to blast it into a plasma with a temperature around 500,000 degrees, many times hotter than the surface of the sun. The process of blasting tin is then repeated 50,000 times per second to produce EUV light in the quantities necessary to fabricate chips. The upshot here, Luke, is that these machines that make these EUV light bulbs, let's call them, contain 457,329 parts. And they each cost over $100 million and are the most expensive mass-produced machine tools in the history of man.
If we bring it back to investing a little bit, like this is ASML, right? They're the guys that make these machines.
Yeah, exactly. Our world, our modern world now, runs entirely on semiconductors. Everything, all of it. Like if you don't think it runs on semiconductors, it does. Somehow, some way, somewhere down the chain, and that this is the new oil, right? This is the new essential thing you need to have, right? So what's crazy, I think, or crazy maybe is the wrong word, what's hard to wrap your mind around is that the bleeding edge of this industry, meaning everything having to do with AI, cannot be made without this EUV light, and that is only made by one company, ASML. A company in the Netherlands. And there's another company that kind of fits in this bucket, TSM. If that company goes down, 37% of the world's chip capacity basically goes offline and the world goes back to the dark ages to some non-trivial extent. Point being that it's kind of astounding to think that there's a company in the Netherlands and a company in Taiwan that should anything happen to them, our way of life gets confounded to a degree we would find unrecognizable.
And let me just kind of summarize back kind of who these players are and what they do. So ASML make these $100 million machines that with their lasers and their tin and their extreme ultraviolet light, they manufacture those machines. They sell those machines to Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC. And TSMC have most of those machines currently in Taiwan, which is potentially massive geopolitical risk. TSMC are using ASML's machines to manufacture semiconductors for companies like NVIDIA, AMD, Samsung, Intel, others. And ultimately, as you're quite right to say, all of society basically runs on this stuff. So if we lose ASML or TSMC, then it won't be very long before our ability to continue to be productive as a society kind of fizzles out, or at least slows down substantially while we kind of ramp up a domestic capability in the US and in other countries. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got that absolutely right. And just maybe to make it even more pointed or more real, during the lockdown phase of COVID, there were massive shortages. And when you have a chip shortage, we know a car, for example, can't ship. Modern cars now have chips, right? And so all of a sudden, people had no cars. All of a sudden, some people couldn't drive to work. Now imagine all of that with no phones, no computers. Everything that our modern world runs on all of a sudden can't be made, which is insane to think about.
And governments are trying to do something about this, but it's, a multi-year effort and requiring significant investment to try and recreate the capability that's currently sitting in that tiny little island in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing. What I truly loved about this book is that the way he wrote it was in the style of a political thriller. I mean, so skillfully. I can't praise Chris Miller enough, and I hope to have a conversation with him. But it reads like a tense political thriller, and the sort of I'm not ruining anything for anyone. This is in fact the real world. But the question we're left with is, given the importance of TSM, which lives on the small island of Taiwan, We know China wants that island.
Yep.
And we know that in order to get that island, there's a huge risk to TSM. We also know China has been practicing all kinds of military strategies and creating amphibious tanks. I mean, they're doing everything they can to rattle their sabers to say, no, we're serious. We're coming to get it. But the flip side is TSM is so important to everyone, including China. So if it ever goes down, China itself would be devastated.
Yeah. And just to sort of broaden the complexity a little bit, like this is not made any better by recent embargoes where the Biden administration, the US, have effectively said to the companies at the end of this, like Nvidia and AMD, guys, you can't ship the stuff you've produced with all of these crazy technologies. If it's above a certain threshold of capability, you can't ship it to China because, you know, people are taking hardware that maybe is intended for like someone's gaming PC and it's being repurposed into like missile guidance systems and serious defense capabilities. So I suppose the US are right to embargo that in that way, but that's ratcheting up the tension and making it much more likely that if China can't get its own domestic capability up and running, then they're more likely to, feel the pressure to go and take over Taiwan.
It's wild out there, Luke. It's truly wild out there.
All eyes are on Ukraine, but this is potentially a much bigger threat in the wings. Who knows what 2023 will have in store for us all?
Right. We are right. The roaring 20s continue. It's been a great time so far. Right? Get your party hat, folks.
Should we talk about something a bit more optimistic and sunny, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe our Spotify.
So actually that's true. Let's do a little 7 investing advert. Good shout. So we got our Spotify stats. Let me dig some of these open actually. So we're a No Limit podcast. We're a new addition to the 7 Investing podcast, which has been running for about 2 years. The podcast is now in the top 5% most shared globally. That's great. And we're the top 5% most followed podcasts. That's really good. Although I think you've got to look at this with a bit of a pinch of salt because there are a shit ton of podcasts out there that never make it past episode 1. So there's probably a good 50% out there that don't even factor. But still, we're doing great. And a stat I did enjoy, 69% of our listeners discovered us in 2022. So it's gathering steam. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're getting value out of it, maybe an opportunity and ask, go tell a friend. Go send a link to a friend. Let's see if we can double our audience. And our director of marketing, Sam Bailey, shared some other stats. I was quite intrigued. Did you look at the top 5 countries where we're popular? So it's all the ones that you'd expect, like the US, the UK, Australia, Canada. But in 5th place was Singapore. So hi to our Singaporean listeners.
Hey.
I hope we haven't terrorized you with too much Taiwan chat.
I hear great things about Singapore. Can't wait to visit.
I've never been.
I've never been to Asia, yeah. And in fact, I'd like to make a request of our audience, if possible. We usually tweet an episode on the Twitter. And so if there's something that resonated with you, or you have a question or a comment or a difference that you hold, or you want to set Luke's take straight and, wise him up a bit, please feel free. We want to encourage the banter and the direct interaction with our listeners. Sure. So speak up.
Yeah, maybe tweet Krzysztof and tell him how his understanding of physics is completely back to front.
All right. Luke, you want to tell us about the Lovelace test?
Yes, I do. This is really interesting stuff. Now, have you been checking out any of these fantastic AI tools like ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E 2? You done any creating with any of those?
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about that next episode, but dear Lord.
It's incredible stuff.
It's here, right? It's here, right? That's the thing, right? It's here.
AI is here, albeit a large language model, but it's good enough for me. It's all intents and purposes. So I did run into something quite interesting called the Lovelace test 2.0, in fact. So we might all be familiar with the Turing test from way back in the 40s, 50s, proposed by Alan Turing. And as I think he called it, the imitation game. So essentially, could a computer fool a third party into believing that it was a human? And I don't think Alan Turing ever intended that test to really be conducted. It was more like something he discussed in the margins of some other paper, I think. But some chaps have recently proposed the Lovelace test too, which is essentially, can an AI demonstrate creativity to the level that it can convince a human that it's truly creative? And I think we are there, I would say. I've seen some just incredible works of art. The one that really caught my eye, though, and it's been going viral on Twitter, you've probably seen it, The Avengers 1980, directed by Wes Anderson.
No, I have not.
So someone's taken Midjourney, which is one of these image creation tools, and just by using the prompt, The Avengers 1980, directed by Wes Anderson, he's produced this set of incredible visuals of, this is what the Avengers would look like, and everyone's looking very kind of sullen and Bill Murray-esque in their kind of 50s suits. And he followed it up with Star Wars, directed by Wes Anderson. So, the sort of creativity, or at least, the seemingly creative nature of some of these tools, who knows what utility we'll find for them. I'm using Chat GPT almost every day at the moment. I've actually just taken the opportunity to put it on my home screen, and I'm kind of opening it with just random questions every day and having a conversation with this thing. It's remarkable. But I don't know if anyone's officially declared that the Lovelace 2 test has been passed, but to all intents and purposes, this thing, for my money at least, is creative.
It's so stunning to me, Luke, to reflect on this moment of history. Sometimes, it just takes time to understand the significance of something. I mean, the way history works, right? You just need space and you need a little bit of perspective, right? But correct me if I'm wrong, it almost feels like this thing drops and almost immediately people who've played with it or experiencing it are saying, okay, we're in a new world, almost overnight. And yet it's just the beginning.
People are using a combination of these tools to create beautiful imagery, write scripts. Probably the tools are here today. And I think now the discovery is kind of how it's, we're now only limited by our imagination, how we can use these things for entertainment, but also for utility. It's really going to be an accelerant to really anybody, almost in any job.
You know what this makes me think of a little bit is the question of vinyl. We went from music on on vinyl, and then we had the cassette, and then we had the CD, and the cassette and the CD both were phased out, then the MP3, right? But then human longing brought back vinyl because there's something beautiful or satisfying about a physical circle that spins and the attention and care you need to run it, as opposed to the ease and quickness of, say, a CD, right? I wonder if humans, in the age of AI, if we're going to go through a similar sort of curve where it's like, okay, AI then starts taking over everything. And will we begin to feel a nostalgia for, say, something written merely by a human? And then we'll have two categories, like art, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, somebody controversially recently used one of these image creation tools and entered the result in an art contest somewhere in the States and won the contest, right? So, kind of sort of comical thing to have happened, but inevitable. And, one day an AI written novel will win, the Booker Prize, and AI created movies will be winning Oscars. I guess we're just going to need like a whole new category, a way of judging the world. Yeah. Is something less worthwhile because it wasn't created by humans? I don't think so.
No, it's a great philosophical question. And maybe to land this back to our investing theme, I think it's worth pointing out that the one company on the planet that makes the most advanced chips for the purpose of AI is NVIDIA. You could use that bit of data for your own investing explorations.
Yeah. So before we wrap up today, I thought I'd pick up a question that came from our Discord. We were chatting with some members, and Babo Vincenza on the 7 Investing Discord put a question to us, and I thought maybe the podcast would be a good place to debate this one. So he asked, how do the different lead advisors think about risks, and what are useful and less useful ways to frame risk? What are the mental traps you could fall into? And also, do we discuss risk of our investing with our co-investors, like our spouses? So I wonder if I could pitch that one over to you. How do you think about risk?
I'll take this on the highest of levels first. Is I'd say there is no such thing as no risk. Like, life by definition is risky. So let me just lay that out there. And if you wish to convince yourself otherwise, then it seems like you're going to fall into some trap or other. Because whether it's getting out of bed and crossing traffic, or obviously investing, everything has risk.
Taking a cold shower day after day.
Right. Right. There's a risk that I'm going mad by doing this to myself voluntarily. Maybe the first intuitive response I have, Luke, is it's in a sense essential to define the context with which you're trying to answer that question. So by that, I'll give an easy example. There is no such thing as like an absolute amount or level of risk, because it's all contextual. So if you're, say, 25 years old, the amount of risk you theoretically should be taking is higher than, say, if you're 80 years old and retired. And that doesn't make risk itself as a quantity better or worse. It's a variable. But the mistake for a younger person would be to avoid risk, meaning have loss aversion, whereas somebody who's retired, their mistake would be taking on too much. So it's kind of the know yourself, know what you're trying to accomplish, and then assess carefully whether it's too little, too much, or some balanced amount.
The key thing there is just not being blind to it. Like, as you say, there's risk in everything. I think part of the art as an investor is to just ensure you understand and quantify the risks, and to sort of structure your portfolio in such a way that there's no one event that could completely wipe you out. Do you consider yourself a risk-taking investor at your ripe old age of 42?
Unfortunately, I know I look young and dashing, but I'm 43. So there's more mileage on this horse, Luke, than meets the eye. I think I fall in the risk-tolerant group. I have a appetite for life, which means that when I err on the side of too much risk. And that's something that's essential for me to know, and future wisdom will be for me to moderate that risk as I get older. And now that I have a partner with whom I share responsibility, to go back to the question, knowing my inherent attraction to, I call it the higher risk, higher reward portion of the map, ethically, I know that I just can't take on as much risk as I would like to, or feel drawn or compelled to.
Right. I think I'm similar. I've got a number of things in my portfolio that are more overwhelmingly likely to go to zero. Like they're just going to get wiped out. But in the small chance that they do succeed, the return is going to be enormous. So I'm quite comfortable with that. Ideally, I'd like to have many more of those bets. In poker parlance, it's like equity. If there's a 1 in 10 chance of getting like 50 times return, but 9 out of 10 times you're going to end up with nothing, well, it still makes sense to make that bet. But ideally, you want to make that bet like 1,000 times, because then the math's on your side. But it's hard to ferret out those companies because if you don't really understand the risks inherent in some of them, you could find you've got something that like 10 out of 10 times is going to go to zero.
I'm glad you brought it back to poker. And the easy example of this is if you're sitting at the poker table and you need, let's say, an inside straight, meaning you need the one card to connect the 5, right? There's, the odds, right? You could calculate the odds of you getting the card you need. But most people, or at least most people that don't play poker on any serious level, they ignore all other factors and just basically let their curiosity, like, I only need one card, so let me put in the money to get the card and find out, right? But that's leaving it up to, call it luck or chance. The correct thing to do is to calculate how much you could win versus how much it's going to cost you, right? And compare that ratio odds to the odds of getting the card. And that's what I would call proper risk management or analysis. Risk analysis would be better, right? That's not in an empty field. I'm curious. For sure, I want the next card. I want to see and I want to hope I get that missing card. But oftentimes, it is incorrect. And so the play is to lay your hand down. And doing that, right, repeatedly trains you to think in these kinds of ways.
Yeah. The thing that always sort of makes me have a wry smile. So in a poker game, you can do something called rabbit hunting. So if you've folded, but if you're really curious, you can ask the dealer if it's a friendly game to show you what the card would have been. And, I kind of have a little smile at my friends when they kick themselves because the card they wanted did come in and they folded. But up until the point that card's turned over, it is every card, right? It's this eigenspace of possibilities. And it's like, Schrodinger's cat in the box. It's every single card in the deck until you turn it over. So the rabbit hunting is kind of irrelevant, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. I trained myself to never do that.
And you can't do that in real life, right? You make an investment or you make a decision, you decide to propose and get married, right? Unless you're Doctor Strange, you can't look down, the multiverse of possibilities and see which is the optimal decision. You just got to make the best decision you can and live with it, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. That seems to me the ditch of inviting regret when you don't need to.
Yeah.
Right. Why look back? And that kind of fits in a little bit with your worry portfolio that we were talking about, right? Like the difficulty of truly selling a position so that you don't torture yourself with what could have been. You make the choice and then you move on.
Agree. Yeah. Like I said, for me, that works for me. And you have your own method, but bringing it back again, we don't want to repeat what we said last week, but the key is know thyself and, do things that just make it easier for you to manage your own emotions, whatever that means for you. Should we just touch on the co-investor point? So, our colleague Baba Vincenzo was asking, do we discuss risk and our investments with our spouses? Bit tongue in cheek. I was going to ask you, is your significant other a risk taker? Clearly she is because she's agreed to marry you. But do you discuss your portfolio with her?
No, I don't. This is one of those odd things where, because I'm in this world so much and spend so much time doing this, I most of the time, it's the last thing I want to do on our dog walks. For that reason alone, my own sanity. Sometimes if some exciting stuff is happening, I'll talk her ear off about, I remember the GameStop saga and I couldn't stop thinking about what in goodness sakes is going on here. But other than maybe larger things, I don't. Do you?
I don't. No, I don't. For other reasons as well. Like Katrina has her own index investments. There's certain she's not permitted because of her job to invest in individual companies, and to follow the guidelines of her employer, it's better if I just don't discuss what's in my portfolio with her. She is aware that we are significantly poorer than we were a year ago.
She has an inkling, huh? Yeah, are we having fun with this investing thing yet, or what?
Well, I feel like I'm learning a lot from the experience of 2022. That's going to make me a better investor for the rest of my life. So yeah.
Oh yeah, right. That's such a good perspective. Thank you for mentioning that, Luke. For everyone that's in it with us right now, it really is this feeling of it's never going to end. I've lost, I'm wounded, and it's better just to die. Don't die. Do not leave. It always clears up and gets better. And it might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but it always does change. And the lessons you learn here will stay with you for the rest of your investing life, which hopefully is very, very long. Absolutely. Especially if you take cold showers in the morning. So
very good. Well, okay. Should we round it out with a 3 conversations game? You ready for this?
Let's do it. Okay. I'm ready.
We've nailed one of my conversations already because I had a question about FTX, but I think we've covered that earlier in the episode. So I'm going to have to ad hoc a 3rd question, but let's see how we go. So I've got a fun one for you to start off with. So you might recall a couple of weeks ago, our CEO Simon had a power outage and he had to run to his sister's house to rejoin our team call. So if I gave you 24 hours notice to prepare, how long could you and your wife last, confined to your home, including the roof and the garden, with no utilities, no contact with the outside world?
Wow.
A bit more of an investing one. Number two, because I've been a big believer in work from home, and I'm now scratching my head and wondering if this thesis is right or not. So I'd be intrigued as to your view. What is the real future of flexible working, work from home? Because I'm going to use your insights to inform my own investing strategy. And let me come up with a question on the hoof. Okay, what is the greatest meal you could prepare for $1? And I say $1 because right now you can buy a 7 investing subscription for $1 for as a sort of trial
that
teaser.
Dollar can go a long way, right?
you get to nix one of those 3, and then I'll pick one of the other 2.
Yes. Oh wow, such good questions, Luke. I'll nix the best meal for $1.
Right. Well, let's round it out with some fun, because it's a wordier question. I'm intrigued by the answer. So you're confined to the home. I'm cutting off all the power. You got to do your preparingism. You've got 24 hours. This time tomorrow. How long could you last?
So obviously no getting grocery.
You can stock up in advance, but come that 24-hour point, we're cutting you off from the outside world.
Oh, so we did. So right, to be clear, I have 24 hours to. I feel like I could. We would last till we died.
Oh, nice. Okay, let's hear it.
50.
Excellent. Well, okay. Clearly that's true. But were you implying like a death of old age, not a death of starvation in a few weeks?
Right.
I'll shut up. Come on, what's your answer?
The theory I think I was going on is that it doesn't seem impossible, given the little land we have and enough grains and things to plant, that we would die of anything physical. And in terms of, say, my own daily life, all I do is read anyway. So I'd be nothing would change. I'd just sit in my chair and do exactly what I do anyway. So I'd say without answering your question exactly, whether I could solve the water problem would depend on. That's what the answer depends on. Would I be able to make a rain catcher thing that would provide enough water, but enough rain barrels? I mean, I don't know, like 10 of them. We could stack them in the back. There's the water. There's the.
I like it. Impressive answer. I believe you. I believe you could last forever. And you've got such an impressive library behind you that by the time you've read the last book, I'm sure you've forgotten the first one. You can go round and round forever.
Right. Just go back. Awesome. It was so good talking to you, Luke. Any last words?
Well, I'm working on the tennis game. Hopefully you do get back to the running. Challenge accepted, although I'm not going to enjoy it on the cold showers. I'll give you an update this time next week, how that's going.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you.